Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling strangely drained, like something was just off? Maybe it was a colleague who always made you second-guess yourself, or a friend who never seemed to celebrate your success without adding a little jab. You can't quite put your finger on it, but deep down, you know, something isn't right. That's the thing about toxic people. They don't always show up as villains. They wear smiles, speak sweetly, pretend to care. But behind the mask lies a hunger for control, manipulation, and emotional power over you. And if you've ever felt confused, guilty, or mentally exhausted after interacting with someone, you're not alone. Many of us have been there. But the good news is, you don't have to stay there. Stoic philosophy offers more than just ancient wisdom. It gives us tools to spot these patterns early, to protect our peace, and to reclaim control over our own thoughts and reactions. In this video, we'll uncover 10 unmistakable signs that someone in your life might just be toxic. They might be dangerous to your soul. You'll learn how to recognize them, disarm their influence, and walk away with your values and your mind intact. Why do we fall into these traps in the first place? Because as social beings, we crave connection. But that craving can blind us and make us ignore the red flags. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Surround yourself with the wrong energy long enough, and it starts to change you. This video is about resisting that. It's about protecting who you are and refusing to let darkness dim your light. Let's begin. Number 1. Constant manipulation. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling strangely uncertain, like you lost a little piece of yourself in the process? Maybe you entered that interaction full of clarity and confidence, but somehow left second-guessing your thoughts, your actions, or even your worth. That disorienting fog you can't quite name, it might not be coincidence, it might be manipulation. Manipulation rarely shows up with flashing lights. It's often dressed in compliments, wrapped in concern, and delivered in a voice that sounds calm, rational, even caring. But it leaves a trail. If someone praises you in front of others while quietly sowing doubt behind closed doors, if they offer helpful suggestions that somehow make you feel less capable, or if they use your mistakes to build their credibility, these are not acts of friendship or mentorship. These are tactics of quiet control. The manipulator's goal isn't to support you. It's to bend your thinking until it folds into theirs. And the damage it causes isn't always loud, but it's deep. Over time, you start looking outward for validation instead of inward for truth. You become emotionally dependent on the very person who's eroding your self-trust. Your inner voice softens until it can no longer stand on its own without their permission. This kind of influence is slow, silent, and devastating. It makes you feel like you're being guided, but really, you're being held. From the Stoic perspective, this is one of the greatest losses you can suffer. Not the loss of status or opportunity, but the loss of self-mastery. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." The Stoics believe that true power doesn't come from persuading others, it comes from ruling your own mind. Manipulators thrive when you abandon that rule. They flourish when you let their words become more persuasive than your own reason. But when you reclaim your authority, when you decide to think clearly, speak truthfully, and act with intention, you become untouchable. Let me tell you about someone I knew personally, a woman named Rachel who worked in marketing. When she first joined a mid-sized creative agency, she was assigned to work with a senior strategist named Tom. He was friendly, articulate, and always made her feel seen. In meetings, he complimented her ideas, often saying things like, "Rachel has a sharp eye for brand tone," or "That headline was pure gold." But over time, something shifted. He started offering to polish her copy before it went to clients. Then he began adding his name to her pitch decks, and slowly, his feedback became more about pointing out tiny missed opportunities and less about building on her vision. She found herself waiting for his approval before sending anything out. At first, she thought it was part of learning. But when a senior client praised a campaign she'd created, Tom jumped in and said, "Glad I pushed her in the right direction." Rachel felt small. But even more than that, she felt unsure. She began doubting if she deserved the credit. She wondered if she was good enough on her own. And that was the moment she realized this wasn't mentorship. It was manipulation dressed up as guidance. If you don't take back your mind, manipulation becomes a mental cage. You start to think less, not because you're incapable, but because someone convinced you it's safer that way. You wait for approval before acting. You fear stepping outside the dynamic. And worse, you might even confuse this manipulation with mentorship, thinking, they're just looking out for me. That illusion is what keeps you stuck. But the Stoics give us tools, not just philosophy, but daily practice to dismantle that illusion. The first is awareness. Pay attention to how you feel after every interaction. Do you feel more confident? Or do you feel confused? Do you leave empowered or quietly ashamed? Writing things down helps. When you start keeping a log, just a few bullet points per interaction, you'll begin to see patterns that were invisible before. Manipulators rely on your forgetfulness. But a Stoic cultivates clarity through observation. Next, you rebuild your internal voice. Each morning, ask yourself, what would I do if I trusted myself fully today? Write your answer. Then ask, who, if anyone, gets to challenge my sense of direction? This daily inquiry resets your boundaries. It reminds you that your clarity does not require permission. And when manipulation shows up, you'll feel it, not because you've become paranoid, but because your internal compass is once again strong enough to register distortion. Then comes the most powerful step, boundary-driven response. You don't need to accuse. You don't need to fight. You simply hold your ground. When someone says, I'm just trying to help, you can respond calmly, thanks. I've got this covered. When they insist, you really need to listen to me on this, you can say, I've already made my decision, and I'm comfortable with it. These statements are firm, respectful, and closed. You're not inviting debate, you're reclaiming direction. And Rachel, once unsure, once quietly unraveling, began to do the work. She started writing things down after every interaction, not with emotion, but with clarity. What was said, how it made her feel, what the outcome was. After 2 weeks, a pattern emerged, one she couldn't ignore. The praise was always followed by undermining. The compliments were always attached to control. She began each morning with a question she'd learned from reading Stoic Philosophy. What would I do today if I trusted myself fully? And slowly, she stopped second-guessing every sentence. She stopped handing her voice over to someone else's judgment. And instead of reacting with emotion, she responded with calm truth. When Tom offered to rewrite her email, just in case, she smiled and said, I've already gone through it a few times, I'm confident in this version. When he jumped into a client call to take credit again, she followed up with the client later, one-on-one, sharing her part in the project and asking for direct feedback. Not with defensiveness, but with dignity. And when the time came to lead a major pitch presentation, she made a choice. She presented it on her own. And she opened the meeting with a quiet but powerful line. This concept came from my desk, from weeks of testing, iteration, and honest collaboration with the team. I'm proud to walk you through it myself. That moment wasn't loud, but it was defining. She didn't fight, she didn't complain. She simply stood up and took back her mind, not because someone gave her permission, but because she remembered she never needed it in the first place. The shift is subtle but powerful. You're no longer reacting, you're deciding. You're no longer seeking approval, you're offering clarity. You're not waiting to be guided, you're leading yourself. And the irony is, the manipulator often doesn't know how to respond to that. Because when someone stands in their truth with calm confidence, the game ends. There's nothing left to twist. There's no weakness to exploit. And in that moment, something returns to you, something that was never truly lost, only forgotten. Your voice, your power, your inner authority. The freedom that no one can steal unless you hand it over. That's what Stoicism restores. Not through emotion, not through confrontation, but through reason, clarity, and the quiet courage to think for yourself. Number 2, a mask of charm. Charm can be comforting. It's warm, inviting, and often makes you feel like you've finally found someone who gets you. But sometimes what looks like connection is really camouflage. This is what makes charm one of the most insidious traits used by toxic individuals. It's not aggressive. It's not loud. It doesn't warn you. Instead, it walks softly, makes you smile, and then slowly gains access to your trust, your choices, and your boundaries. There's nothing inherently wrong with charm when it's grounded in sincerity. Real charm, when aligned with honesty and virtue, can build connection, soften defenses, and foster empathy. But when charm is used as a mask, it becomes a tool of deception. It allows someone to hide their true intentions behind a pleasant exterior. It blinds you to warning signs because the packaging is so polished, so disarming, so easy to believe in. One of the first red flags is when someone's kindness always feels performative. They're overly attentive, almost too perfect in how they remember your details or say the right thing at exactly the right moment. But there's a rehearsed rhythm to it, as if they've learned what to say, not because they feel it, but because they know it works. They never challenge you directly. They avoid confrontation and keep everything smooth. And yet, something inside you feels unsettled, like you're being studied more than you're being understood. They often speak in superlatives. You're not just talented, you're the most gifted person they've ever met. You're not just kind, you're an angel, one of a kind. These extreme compliments may feel flattering, but when someone offers constant praise without depth, it's not a reflection of your worth. It's a strategy to lower your guard. Because once you've been disarmed by affection, it becomes easier for them to shift your perspective, question your decisions, or even influence your values. When charm is a weapon, it's always conditional. You'll notice the shift when you stop playing along. The warmth disappears the moment you assert yourself. The flattery turns cold when you ask for accountability. You start realizing their kindness was never about caring for you. It was about controlling how you saw them. The relationship is unbalanced, built on pleasing rather than respecting, and your sense of reality begins to warp around their image. The Stoics offer a clear lens through which to view this kind of deception. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. This means that over time, if you allow yourself to be surrounded by superficiality or deceit, it begins to shape how you think. About others, about the world, and especially about yourself. Stoicism urges us to value substance over surface, integrity over appearance. It tells us to examine character, not by what people say, but by what they consistently do. When you're caught in the illusion of charm, it becomes harder to separate flattery from truth. You may begin to question your own instincts, asking yourself if you're being too harsh, too skeptical, or too defensive. That's part of the trap. Charm-based manipulation works because it makes you doubt your perception while reinforcing your emotional investment. You become afraid of seeming ungrateful or cold, even when something deep down feels wrong. And that confusion isn't harmless. It's mentally and emotionally exhausting. Over time, the dissonance between what someone says and how they behave starts to create tension within you. You feel conflicted. One part of you wants to trust their words, while another part of you senses their behavior doesn't align. This inner split drains your energy, clouds your clarity, and makes you more vulnerable to subtle forms of control. The harm of this manipulation isn't always visible from the outside, but it corrodes you from within. It weakens your discernment. It blurs your emotional boundaries. And most importantly, it makes you forget that your attention is something valuable, something that should be earned through integrity, not charm. So how do we, as students of Stoicism, respond to this kind of manipulation? Not with suspicion or paranoia, but with quiet observation and reason. Stoicism teaches us not to judge by appearances, but to anchor ourselves in what is real, what is consistent, and what aligns with virtue. The first step is to slow down your emotional response. Charm is designed to be fast. It creates an immediate bond, an accelerated sense of trust. But the Stoic slows everything down, not to create distance, but to create clarity. You don't need to reject kindness, but you do need to give yourself time to see whether that kindness stands the test of discomfort, disagreement, or disapproval. If it only survives when things are easy, it's not real. The second step is to observe what happens in silence. Watch how someone behaves when there's nothing to gain, when they're not being watched, when no one is applauding. That's where real character shows up. Do they keep their word when it's inconvenient? Do they treat others with respect when those people can't benefit them? Stoicism tells us that a person's virtue is revealed not in what they say, but in what they do when no one's looking. The third step is to check your own need for validation. Often we fall for manipulative charm not because we're weak, but because we're hungry for recognition. We want to feel special, appreciated, understood. And when someone gives us that feeling on a silver platter, it's easy to take it at face value. But the Stoic practices self-sufficiency, not in isolation, but in self-regard. You don't need others to constantly affirm your worth when you've already done the inner work to recognize it yourself. And finally, practice the discipline of questioning what feels too good to be true. This doesn't mean becoming cynical. It means becoming curious. When someone flatters you, don't dismiss it, but don't internalize it without reflection either. Ask, what have they seen in me to say this? Is it rooted in reality, or is it a strategy? Stoic discernment isn't about closing your heart. It's about opening your eyes. At the heart of it all, Stoicism reminds us that appearances deceive, but actions reveal. Charm can warm a room, but character lights the path. When we learn to tell the difference, we stop being easily impressed and start being deeply grounded. And in that grounding, we find something that no amount of flattery can offer: clarity, stability, freedom. Number 3, lies without conscience. There's a kind of lie that doesn't just distort the truth, it slowly distorts your perception of reality. It doesn't come with a dramatic confession or a guilty expression. It slips quietly into conversations cloaked in confidence, wrapped in just enough charm to disarm you. And by the time you realize what's happened, your sense of trust has already started to fracture. Some people lie without hesitation, and more dangerously, without remorse. They don't just twist facts when they're cornered. They craft entire narratives designed to protect their ego, elevate their status, or shift blame away from themselves. They don't flinch when called out. Instead, they double down, manipulate the situation, and often find a way to make you question your own memory, your own intentions, or your own sanity. You'll recognize this kind of person by what they do when the truth becomes inconvenient. Maybe you've worked with someone who confidently takes credit for a group project, one that you carried. When the spotlight shines, they smile and speak as if it was their vision all along. And when you bring it up, they act confused. "Oh, I thought we agreed it was a team effort." Or they say, "You misunderstood, I was just summarizing our work." Gaslighting, rationalizing, deflecting. They don't just lie to others, they lie so convincingly, they begin to believe it themselves. What makes this so damaging isn't just the lie, it's the erosion of your trust in your own perception. Each time they twist the facts and make it sound reasonable, you start to doubt what actually happened. You question if maybe you were too sensitive. Maybe it wasn't a big deal. Maybe you should just let it go. And just like that, the truth gets diluted and your grip on it weakens. Stoicism teaches that truth isn't just a moral ideal, it's a foundation for inner stability. Seneca once wrote, "Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart." But just as gratitude grounds the soul, deceit distorts it. The Stoics saw falsehood as a fracture in character, not because it offends others, but because it breaks something essential within the liar and the one being lied to. When you're constantly exposed to someone who lies without conscience, you begin to lose your psychological footing. Trust is no longer a given, it becomes a gamble. You grow hesitant to speak up, unsure if your version of events will be twisted or mocked. You become guarded, paranoid, defensive, and over time, your emotional energy isn't spent building relationships, it's spent protecting yourself from betrayal. Let's make this even more personal. Picture this. It's you. You're working hard on a project. You've stayed up late, skipped weekends, poured your creativity into every detail. The final result? It's sharp, it's strategic, it's yours. The day of the presentation comes and your colleague, someone you thought was a friend, steps up and opens the pitch. But instead of giving you credit, they take the mic and say, "I put a lot of hours into this and I'm excited to show what I've come up with." You freeze. Did you mishear them? Maybe they misspoke. Maybe they'll fix it later. They don't. After the meeting, you confront them, not with anger, just confusion. But they dismiss it. "Wait, I thought we were presenting this as a team thing. I didn't mean to make it sound like it was all me." You feel disoriented, embarrassed, and worst of all, you begin to doubt your own response. Maybe I did overreact? That moment right there? That's how lies without conscience steal your clarity. They don't just deceive, they disable your judgment. So how do you respond stoically and strategically when you find yourself in that kind of situation? The first step is simple but powerful. Write it down. Don't try to remember everything in your head. As soon as something feels off, document it. What was said? Who was there? How did it make you feel? Not with judgment, just with precision. Your memory is your first line of defense, and the written word is your clarity when someone tries to rewrite the script. Next, step back and ask yourself, is this consistent with virtue? Stoicism isn't about labeling people good or bad. It's about recognizing behavior that aligns with integrity and behavior that doesn't. When someone's actions don't line up with their words, when their story shifts under pressure, when truth bends to serve their ego, it's not on you to fix them. But it is on you to protect your peace. You don't need to confront every lie, but you do need to reclaim your center. That means resisting the urge to explain yourself over and over again. The Stoic doesn't beg to be believed. They stand in their truth. If needed, speak calmly. I want to clarify what I contributed. No emotion, no drama, just fact. If they deny it, let them. Your goal isn't to control their behavior, it's to control your reaction. One of the most empowering practices is to reaffirm your own version of events privately through journaling. Write what you know is true, what you did, what you delivered, what you witnessed. Not because you need to prove it to anyone, but because you need to remember you're not crazy. Lies aim to distort reality. Truth, when reinforced through logic and self-awareness, rebuilds your inner foundation. Most importantly, recognize the cost of tolerating habitual lying. When you make space in your life for people who disrespect the truth, you start making compromises, tiny ones at first. You stop speaking up as much. You lower your standards for honesty. You convince yourself that this is just how people are. But that's not what Stoicism teaches. Stoicism demands clarity. It demands that we surround ourselves with people who challenge us to be better, not confuse us into shrinking. The person who lies without conscience isn't just playing games with words, they're playing games with your values. And that's not a game you were ever meant to play. So take a breath. Trust what you saw. Trust what you know. And walk forward. Not with resentment, but with resolution. You don't need to argue with someone who's rewritten the truth to fit their story. You just need to live in yours and let that truth become your quiet, unshakable strength. Number 4, lack of empathy. There's a certain kind of silence that hurts more than words ever could. It's the silence you feel when you're opening up about something deeply personal, painful even, and the person across from you gives you nothing. No understanding, no real presence, just blank eyes. Or worse, they quickly change the subject, turn it back on themselves, or offer some shallow one-liner like, "Everyone goes through that." A lack of empathy doesn't always look like cruelty. It often wears the face of indifference. You might be pouring your heart out about something that's kept you up at night, something you've been carrying alone, and instead of being met with space, with stillness, with care, you're met with distance. You're left feeling like your pain is somehow inconvenient, like your emotions are too much, like you should have kept it to yourself. And it cuts deep. Because at our core, we all want one thing, to be seen and understood. When someone lacks empathy, especially someone close to us, it doesn't just hurt, it destabilizes something inside us. You start to feel like maybe your pain isn't valid. Maybe your emotions are overreactions. Maybe the world really is that cold. And slowly, you begin to close up. The signs aren't always obvious at first. It could be that friend who always listens just long enough to respond with their own story. You tell them you've been feeling overwhelmed lately, and they immediately shift gears. "Oh man, you think you're stressed?" And suddenly the spotlight's off you. Or the colleague who never acknowledges when you're upset at work, even though it's clear you're struggling. Or that partner who says, "Well, I don't really know what you want me to do about it," when you're trying to be vulnerable. You might dismiss it as them just being not great with emotions. But what's really happening is deeper than that. They're avoiding the discomfort of your truth. Not because they can't handle it, but because they don't value it. Or worse, they don't value you enough to lean into it. Stoicism doesn't ask us to be cold. It asks us to be composed. And composure without compassion is just coldness in disguise. Epictetus taught that we are born for community, for cooperation, and that understanding one another is part of living wisely. A Stoic doesn't drown in the emotions of others, but neither do they ignore them. They witness, they acknowledge, they bring presence without judgment. Empathy in the Stoic sense is not about fixing someone's pain, it's about not turning away from it. To lack empathy is to treat people like problems to be solved, or worse, noise to be muted. And that's not just a flaw in social skills, it's a fracture in moral character. Now picture this. It's you again. You've been going through something heavy, family issues, stress at work, maybe even grief. You finally gather the courage to open up to someone. Maybe it's a friend you've known for years. You share your feelings carefully, with hope that they'll hold space for you. And instead of leaning in, they say, well, you know, everyone has their battles. Then they look at their phone, or start talking about their weekend, or just move on. At first you feel embarrassed, then disappointed, then strangely ashamed for even having shared. You start to think, maybe I am being dramatic. You wonder if maybe your pain is just yours to carry, and that asking for connection is asking for too much. But here's what Stoicism teaches. Your feelings are real, and your instinct to connect is human. What you need is not less emotion, but better company. The problem isn't that you felt too much. It's that you trusted someone who wasn't capable of meeting you there. And that's not a reason to close off. It's a reason to choose better people. So what do you do when someone consistently lacks empathy? How do you respond without bitterness, but also without betraying yourself? First, recognize what's happening. Don't make excuses for them like they're just busy or they're not an emotional person. People who care show it. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not with the right words, but they show up. They try. Second, remind yourself that your emotions are signals, not threats. If you felt hurt, that's not weakness, it's information. It's telling you that a boundary has been crossed or a connection has been neglected. Your job isn't to silence those feelings, it's to honor them. Third, redirect your energy toward people who do listen, who do care, who don't need to be perfect, but who are present. That's where the Stoic idea of sympathia comes in. The sense that we're all connected and that shared strength is what lifts us through hard times. Seek relationships where that principle lives. And finally, don't waste energy trying to teach empathy to someone who refuses to learn. Some people are too caught up in themselves to meet you where you are. That's not yours to fix. Your responsibility is to protect your peace, not to extract warmth from someone who's emotionally unavailable. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to be met with dignity when you speak your truth. And if someone can't do that, it's not a reason to speak less. It's a reason just to speak to someone else. Number 5, the hunger for control. Control is not always loud. Sometimes it sounds like concern. Sometimes it looks like care. It doesn't show up as commands or ultimatums. It's more subtle than that, more strategic. The hunger for control often disguises itself as helpfulness. It wraps itself in phrases like, I'm just looking out for you, or let me handle that so you don't have to stress. And little by little, your decisions stop being your own. When someone seeks to control you, they rarely start by taking power. They get you to give it away. It starts small. They make suggestions that feel kind. Then those suggestions turn into expectations. Then expectations turn into obligations. And before you realize what's happened, you're filtering every move through their approval. Your schedule, your choices, even your self-worth. One of the clearest signs of this behavior is that you begin to doubt yourself in their presence. They question your judgment, not with insults, but with gentle corrections that chip away at your confidence. Are you sure that's the best way to do it? I just think if you let me take care of it, it'll turn out better. You tell yourself they're being supportive. But support doesn't make you smaller. Control does. What makes this manipulation so dangerous is that it doesn't feel like manipulation until you try to push back. That's when their true intention surfaces. Suddenly, they become cold, critical, even passive-aggressive. You feel guilted for asserting your independence. You're made to believe that your decision is a risk and that trusting yourself is somehow irresponsible. Their message is clear. You can't do this without me. From a Stoic perspective, this is the ultimate threat. Not to your status or reputation, but to your autonomy. Epictetus reminds us that freedom is the only worthy goal in life, and that we must not allow others to control what lies within our own mind. The Stoic path is about mastery of the self, not submission to someone else's agenda. And no matter how polite the control may look on the outside, it's still a chain. You might not even notice it until it's already shaping your behavior. You delay choices because you're waiting for their input. You water down your ideas so they won't disapprove. You second-guess yourself constantly, and if you make a decision without them, you feel anxious, like you've done something wrong, like you've stepped out of line. This kind of control erodes you slowly. You lose not only your voice, but your sense of direction. You start living according to what they think is best. You become a version of yourself that fits their preferences, not your principles. And the longer you live in that space, the harder it becomes to hear your own thoughts over their influence. So how do you break free without blowing everything up? The answer isn't confrontation. It's clarity. It's not about fighting for your freedom. It's about remembering that you already have it. The first step is to reconnect with your own compass. Sit down and ask yourself, what are my values? What do I believe in outside of this person's opinion? Write it down. Read it often. Because when you start making choices that align with your values, you begin to separate your identity from their influence. Next, practice making small decisions without input. Choose where to eat, what to wear, how to spend your afternoon. Notice the discomfort that comes up. Notice the reflex to check in, and then don't. Sit in that independence until it feels normal again. Because it will. Another powerful Stoic tool is the morning reflection. Each day ask yourself, today will I act according to my own reason or someone else's expectation? And remind yourself, acting with integrity might upset some people. But pleasing everyone is not your responsibility. Living in alignment with your principles is. Finally, observe how people respond when you begin reclaiming your choices. A person who truly cares will support your independence, even if it inconveniences them. A person who seeks control will resist it, guilt-trip you, or try to regain power in more subtle ways. That reaction is your answer. Let's put this into practice with something real. And this time, it's about you. Imagine someone close to you, maybe a partner, maybe a mentor, maybe even a family member. They've always offered guidance, always had a plan, and you've grown used to running decisions by them, even when you don't need to. At first, it felt comforting. But lately, it's been draining. You decide to do something simple without their input, like accepting a new opportunity. You're excited, it feels right, but when you tell them, they hesitate. Their words are measured, but their tone cuts. I don't think that's a smart move. I really wish you had talked to me first. In that moment, the old reflex kicks in. You feel shame, doubt, the urge to explain, to backtrack, to apologize. But you pause, you breathe, and then you remember your Stoic reflection from that morning. Do I live by my reason or someone else's reaction? So you respond calmly, I appreciate your thoughts, but I made this decision because it aligns with what matters most to me. I don't need agreement, I need integrity, and I stand by this. That's it. No fight, no drama, just clarity. And for the first time in a long time, you feel what control could never give you. Peace. Because you've stopped living under their shadow. You've started living in your own light. And no one, not even the most well-intentioned controller, can take that from you again. Number 6, blame games and deflection. Some people never take responsibility, not even when the truth is undeniable. They always have an explanation, a twist, a way to make it sound like the issue was never really theirs to begin with. And when things go wrong, their first reflex isn't to reflect, it's to deflect. Blame is their shield, and you're their favorite target. They won't yell, they don't need to. They'll say things like, I thought you were handling that, or, if you had just told me sooner, I could have helped. Their words sound reasonable, but the subtext is clear. This isn't my fault. And by the end of the conversation, you find yourself explaining, justifying, even apologizing for something you didn't do. People who habitually deflect blame are not looking for truth. They're looking for escape. They view mistakes not as opportunities to grow, but as threats to their ego. So they rewrite the story. They change the focus. They make themselves the misunderstood victim. And the worst part? They're often so convincing that even you start to wonder if maybe they're right. You'll know you're dealing with this pattern if you begin to feel guilty more often than you feel heard. You may find that even when you approach the situation with calm, they twist your words. You bring up a missed deadline. They bring up how overwhelmed they've been. You ask about a miscommunication. They say you're being too sensitive. Over time, every attempt to clarify turns into a subtle attack against you. And slowly, your confidence begins to shrink under the weight of their denials. This isn't just frustrating, it's corrosive. When someone constantly shifts blame, they're not just avoiding accountability, they're inviting you to carry emotional burdens that were never yours. And if you're empathetic by nature, you'll carry them. You'll replay conversations in your head. You'll question your instincts, and eventually, you'll silence your own voice to maintain the peace. The Stoics would say this is the moment your peace has been hijacked. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, if someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change, for it is the truth I seek. That's the mindset of a mature, free-thinking person, not someone obsessed with appearances, not someone afraid of imperfection. The Stoic values truth over comfort, responsibility over image. When someone constantly blames others, they are not showing strength. They are revealing fragility disguised as control. It takes courage to admit fault. It takes even more to do so when it's inconvenient. And those who cannot carry that weight will try to place it on your back again and again. So how do you protect yourself from being the scapegoat in someone else's emotional story? The first Stoic strategy is objectivity. Before reacting, pause and ask, what actually happened? Not how it felt, not how it looked, but what is? What are the facts? This keeps you grounded in reality when someone tries to distort it. Next, adopt the habit of asking clarifying questions, not defensively, but with precision. If someone says, you always make things harder, respond with, can you give me a specific example of what you mean by that? That one sentence does two things. It demands accountability, and it breaks the emotional spell of generalization. Most blame-based attacks fall apart when faced with clarity. Then, document your interactions, especially in recurring situations, at work, in partnerships, or family dynamics. Not to build a case, not to win an argument, but to protect your sanity. Because when blame is repeatedly thrown at you, your memory becomes your anchor. Writing down what was said, what was done, and how you responded helps you separate what's yours from what isn't. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, refuse to carry guilt that doesn't belong to you. There is a kind of quiet power in saying, that's not mine to hold, even silently. You can acknowledge someone's feelings without accepting false responsibility. You can be kind without becoming the cushion for their deflection. Now let's bring this down to something real, something personal. Imagine this. You're working with a teammate on a project. It's not perfect, but you've handled your part. The files were delivered, the edits made, the communication clear. But when the project hits a snag, they bring it up in a meeting and say, I tried to get things on track, but I guess not everyone was on the same page. There's no direct call out, but the implication is loud, and all eyes shift to you. Later you bring it up privately. You explain your side, calmly, but they respond with, I wasn't blaming you. I just wish you had flagged the issue earlier. Maybe then we could have avoided this. You feel that knot in your stomach, that pull to say sorry, even though you're not the one who failed to follow through. You want to smooth it over, keep the peace. But instead, you remember your training, your journaling, your Stoic lens. You take a breath and say, I'm open to feedback, but in this case, I know I fulfilled my responsibilities. I communicated updates and delivered on time. If there's something specific I missed, I'd be happy to hear it. There's a pause. No specifics come, just silence. And in that moment, something shifts. You didn't argue, you didn't fight, you simply refused to accept a false narrative. And in doing so, you walked out of the blame game. Not bitter, but free. That's the essence of Stoicism. Not to prove you're right, but to remain rooted in what is. Not to silence others, but to stop silencing yourself. You don't need to win every argument. You just need to stop apologizing for things that aren't yours to own. That's how you reclaim your peace. And that's how you rise, quietly, powerfully, above the blame. Number 7, the pleasure of pain. There's a certain kind of cruelty that doesn't shout, it smiles. It doesn't insult you outright, doesn't raise its voice. Instead, it waits, it watches. And when life knocks you down, when you fail, falter, or fall apart, this person lights up, even if just for a second. Their pleasure is subtle, but it's real. Some people take joy not in their own progress, but in your pain. They may not admit it, but you'll see it in their eyes when something goes wrong for you. They'll chuckle under their breath when you make a mistake. They'll raise an eyebrow when you're corrected in front of others. They'll feign concern, but somehow their words always carry an edge, just sharp enough to remind you that you stumbled. The signs are quiet but unmistakable. They're the ones who love to retell your embarrassing moments, laugh a little too hard at your missteps, or casually mention your failures in rooms where they know it'll sting. Their words might sound harmless. Remember that time you froze during the meeting? Classic. But you can feel the delight underneath. It's not nostalgia. It's nourishment for their ego. This isn't teasing. It's emotional predation. People who operate this way aren't seeking connection, they're seeking control. And rather than build themselves up, they find it easier to chip away at those around them. Your pain becomes proof that they're doing better, that they're above you, even if only for a moment. From the Stoic lens, this behavior reveals deep weakness, not strength. Epictetus taught that we should associate with those who make us better. That means surrounding ourselves with people who find joy in our growth, not our suffering. The Stoic doesn't rejoice in the failure of others because they understand that we are all connected. Your fall is a mirror. It could be any of us. And if someone enjoys that fall, they've not only abandoned empathy, they've abandoned their humanity. The deeper danger here isn't their behavior, it's how it shapes your own. When you're around someone who takes pleasure in your pain, you begin to hide your struggle. You don't speak up when something's wrong. You keep your wounds to yourself. Why? Because you've learned that vulnerability doesn't earn support. It earns smiles from people who want to see you bleed. And so, you armor up. You stop trusting. You stop sharing. Over time, this damages more than your relationships. It damages your sense of self. You begin to question whether you're weak for struggling. You internalize the idea that pain is shameful, and that mindset becomes a cage. Because if pain is shame, you'll never feel safe enough to be fully seen. And without being seen, there can be no true connection. So how does a Stoic respond to this kind of quiet cruelty? Not with anger, and not with revenge, but with clarity. The first step is observation. Pay attention not just to what people say, but to how they respond to your difficult moments. Do they offer help, or do they subtly highlight your flaws? Do they check in, or do they linger in your discomfort just a little too long? Your emotions will give you hints, but it's your reasoning that confirms the truth. Next, create space. You don't have to call them out. You don't have to fight, but you do have to stop feeding the dynamic. Pull back your vulnerability, not from the world, but from them. Choose wisely where you place your trust. Not everyone is worthy of your open wounds. Then, turn inward. Remind yourself that struggling is not a failure of character. It's part of life. The Stoics embraced adversity not with shame, but with strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." Reclaim that estimate. Pain is not weakness, it's part of becoming who you were meant to be. And finally, replace the space they occupied with those who lift you. The people who don't need you to fall to feel taller, who celebrate your progress and walk beside you when it's hard, not behind you, whispering doubt. Now imagine this. You're in a team meeting, giving a presentation. You slip up. Forget a point, stumble over your words. It happens. You recover, finish strong. But afterward, that one coworker, the one who always seems to enjoy your missteps, leans over and says, "You were this close to falling apart up there." Then they laugh, shake their head like it's nothing. Others chuckle too, unsure what to do. You feel the sting, the flush of embarrassment. The old reflex kicks in. You want to laugh along, make yourself small, get out of the spotlight. But not this time. Because this morning you practiced your Stoic reflection. You reminded yourself, I do not control others' reactions. I control my response. So instead, you meet their gaze and say, we all have off moments. What matters is showing up and following through, which I did. Then you walk away, not coldly, just clearly, because you saw the truth behind the smile. And this time, you didn't feed it. You didn't let their pleasure become your shame. You kept your dignity, and more importantly, you kept your peace. Number 8. Isolation as a weapon. We are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. Marcus Aurelius. That simple reminder from the great Stoic emperor says everything about our nature. We are social beings, designed for connection, interdependence, and mutual strength. So when someone deliberately isolates you, pulling you away from your support systems under the guise of care or intimacy, it's not love, it's a strategy, and one of the oldest weapons in the playbook of toxic control. Isolation doesn't always start with force. It begins with suggestion. At first it sounds like concern. I just don't think your friends really understand you. Your family always puts pressure on you. I'm the only one who really gets it. It feels protective, thoughtful, even loving. And slowly you begin to doubt the people you once trusted. They frame themselves as your safe place, your only place. And as you drift from others, you don't even realize it's happening. You cancel plans. You stop reaching out. You second-guess those you used to lean on. And eventually, the only person left in your circle is them. This isn't an accident, it's a design. Because the more isolated you become, the easier you are to control. You lose external perspective. You stop getting feedback from people who love you without an agenda. You start to believe that this one person's version of reality is the only one that matters. And once that happens, they can mold your thoughts, your confidence, and your decisions. The signs are quiet but unmistakable. They plant seeds of doubt about your relationships. Why did your friend say it like that? You know your sister never really supports you, right? They use subtle guilt. I just feel like I'm never your priority. If you really loved me, you wouldn't need them so much. And they draw lines where there were none before. It's them or me. I just want it to be us. It sounds romantic until you realize what it's actually costing you. The damage runs deeper than lost friendships. When you're cut off from your community, you become emotionally dependent on the person who's doing the cutting. You start to confuse loyalty with isolation. You think pushing people away is proof of commitment. And that illusion, once it settles, turns into quiet desperation. Without outside perspectives, even your own thoughts become distorted. You forget how to test your instincts against reality. You forget how to trust yourself. And worse, when the person isolating you begins to harm you, emotionally, mentally, or otherwise, you have nowhere to go. No one to talk to. No one left who really sees you. The Stoics warned against this kind of detachment, not from the world, but from wisdom. They believed that connection wasn't weakness. It was strength in its highest form. Marcus Aurelius spoke of the universe as one living organism. Epictetus reminded us that our roles in society are part of our duty to live with virtue. Seneca wrote that no one can live happily who lives only for themselves. So if someone is pulling you away from your community, they're not protecting you. They're dismantling your identity. So how do you take your power back when isolation has slowly become your reality? You begin, as the Stoics always did, with observation. Ask yourself, have I stopped talking to people who used to support me? Have I begun hiding my relationships to avoid conflict with this one person? When was the last time I shared something vulnerable with someone besides them? Write it down. List the people you used to feel safe with, friends, family, mentors, and when your last meaningful interaction with each of them was. If that list is emptier than it should be, you're not imagining things. You've been drifting. And now it's time to return. Next, identify small, safe ways to reconnect. A message, a short call, a coffee. You don't need to explain yourself. Just reach out. Let them know you've been distant, but you're still here. People who care won't need an apology. They'll be waiting, quietly hoping you'd come back. Then rebuild your network of support, not just emotionally, but practically. Don't rely on one person for everything. Diversify your circle. Find strength in community again. That's where sympathia, the Stoic concept of universal connection, comes in. It's the understanding that your place in the world is not beside one person, but among many. Finally, create clear boundaries. If the isolating person questions your re-engagement with others, respond simply, I need my relationships. They're part of who I am, and I won't give them up to prove anything. You don't owe them permission to be whole. Now let's bring this back to a real moment, one you may know well. You used to be close with your sister. Weekly calls, shared advice, deep laughs. But since this new relationship started, those calls faded. Your partner said she was too opinionated, too nosy, and not supportive of your life. You didn't notice it at first, but slowly you stopped reaching out, until one day something feels off. You realize you haven't talked to her in months, and when you bring her up, your partner gets quiet, dismissive, maybe even cold. So this time, you choose differently. You text your sister, I miss you. Can we talk sometime this week? She responds within minutes. I've been waiting for that text. You reconnect. And during the call, something becomes clear. She was never the problem. The distance wasn't real. It was engineered. The next morning, you write down what you felt. Clarity, relief, connection. And when your partner later asks, why are you talking to her again? You answer calmly and firmly, because my life is bigger than this relationship, and the people who love me unconditionally deserve to stay in it. You didn't yell, you didn't justify, you just reclaimed what was yours. And in that quiet act of reconnection, you found the one thing isolation tried to take from you, your belonging. Number 9. Jealousy in disguise. Envy is the adversary of the fortunate, Epictetus said. Envy rarely introduces itself honestly. It doesn't walk in and say, I resent your success. Instead, it puts on a smile, offers a compliment, and slips a quiet sting in between the words. It cloaks itself in concern, in advice, in subtle sarcasm, just enough to leave you second-guessing whether you should be proud of what you've achieved. Jealousy, when disguised, is far more corrosive than open hatred, because it pretends to be support. It comes from people you like, people you trust, people you thought were rooting for you. But when your moment comes, when you land the promotion, finish the project, hit the milestone, they don't celebrate. They comment, that's great, but you're not slowing down already, are you? Not bad, just don't get too comfortable. Congrats. But you know Jen did something similar last year, right? Each time, there's a smile, but also a shift. Something feels off, even if you can't name it right away. Their words technically sound supportive, but their tone, their timing, their facial expression tells a different story. The hallmark of disguised jealousy is that it leaves you questioning your own joy. You start to wonder, am I bragging? Was I too proud? Maybe I should tone it down. And just like that, your moment of pride becomes a moment of doubt. This isn't about ego. It's about emotional erosion. When someone consistently undermines your success with subtle jabs or comparisons, they're not just challenging your achievement, they're trying to shrink your sense of self. They need you to feel smaller so they can feel more secure. And often, they don't even realize they're doing it. But your gut does. Your instincts do. The Stoics called this out clearly. Seneca called envy the ulcer of the soul. It doesn't hurt the one being envied, it destroys the one who envies. But if you're on the receiving end of that envy, especially when it's hidden beneath flattery, the damage is real. Not because of the words, but because of the confusion they create. People who hide jealousy behind kindness are dangerous because they make you second-guess your light. You start dimming yourself to make others more comfortable. You withhold your success. You downplay your wins. And over time, you start believing that staying small is the only way to keep your relationships intact. But here's the truth. Genuine people don't feel threatened by your growth. They don't measure your success against their insecurities. They celebrate with you because they're secure in themselves. They don't see your light as a threat. They see it as something that adds to the room. So how do you navigate these moments without bitterness, but also without shrinking? The Stoic response begins with clarity. First, pay attention to your body when someone responds to your news. Do you feel energized or drained? Do you feel validated or subtly mocked? Emotions are data. Your nervous system often knows the truth before your mind does. Then, listen to the tone, not just the words. A person who's jealous in disguise will often speak with forced enthusiasm, mismatched timing, or a backhanded compliment that twists at the end. It's like hearing a melody in the wrong key. Something doesn't sit right. And that's your signal. Next, Journal your reactions. After you share a success with someone, ask yourself, how did I feel after that interaction? Did they uplift me or deflate me? Was I proud or was I suddenly self-conscious? This habit helps you spot patterns, especially when the same person keeps leaving you feeling off. Most importantly, remember this: your success is not a threat. It's not a problem to fix. It's not something to apologize for. The Stoic doesn't flaunt their wins, but they don't hide them either. They stand in their truth with calm pride, and they don't let others redefine what that moment means. Now let's bring it home with something personal. I just wrapped up a huge project I've been working on for months. It's a big deal. It took discipline, focus, and sacrifice. When it's finally done, I share the news with someone I've known for years, a friend I trust. They respond with a grin and say, "Nice, you must be relieved. Though honestly, I was surprised you stuck with it that long. I didn't think you had it in you." I laugh at first, politely, but then it hits. That didn't feel like support. That felt like a slap disguised as a pat on the back. I go home, sit with it. I don't overreact. I don't get dramatic. I do what I've trained myself to do. I reflect. I write in my journal. Shared my project success today. Felt proud. Response left me questioning that pride. Felt like there was envy under the surface. Noted it. Then I breathe. The next time I achieve something meaningful, I choose carefully who I share it with. And when that friend makes another sly remark, I simply respond, "I'm proud of the work I've done. It wasn't easy, but I followed through. That matters to me." Nothing more. I don't argue. I don't seek validation. I just plant my feet where I stand, because I know this now. Someone else's discomfort with my growth is not my burden to carry, and neither is their envy. Number 10, the unrepentant heart. One of the clearest tests of someone's character is what they do when confronted with their mistakes. We all stumble. We all say things we wish we hadn't, do things we regret. It's part of being human. But what truly defines us isn't whether we fail, it's whether we learn from that failure, and whether we're willing to sincerely acknowledge and repair the harm we cause. But some people never cross that bridge from error to empathy. Their heart remains closed, unrepentant, stubborn. They're unwilling or unable to own up to the pain they cause. Instead of offering apologies, they give excuses. Instead of listening, they blame circumstances or blame you for being too sensitive. When confronted, they deflect responsibility, twist the situation, or simply refuse to engage. Their motto might as well be, "It's never my fault." The signs of an unrepentant heart aren't just clear, they're painful. You'll notice that apologies, if they come at all, feel shallow or performative. The words might sound right, "Sorry you felt hurt," or "Sorry, but that wasn't my intention." Yet these phrases always place the burden back on you. There's no real remorse, just a carefully disguised refusal to truly accept responsibility. Repeated mistakes without meaningful change become their signature. You bring up a boundary, and they cross it again. You express a need, and they ignore it repeatedly. Eventually, when you confront them, their response is consistently defensive. "You're making too big a deal of this. Everyone makes mistakes. Why can't you let it go?" The harm isn't just emotional, it's psychological. When you repeatedly experience this refusal to acknowledge wrongdoing, your trust in relationships begins to deteriorate. You start to question your perception, wondering if maybe you are overly sensitive or demanding. You second-guess your feelings. You begin to doubt whether you have the right to expect basic accountability from others. And worse, you internalize this pattern as normal, tolerating behaviors that chip away at your self-respect, dignity, and confidence. This type of relationship becomes a cycle of hurt and disappointment. You tell yourself, maybe this time will be different. But it rarely is. Each cycle further reinforces the painful lesson that perhaps forgiveness is naive. You might even start to pull back, building walls to protect yourself, shutting down vulnerability, because vulnerability feels unsafe around someone who refuses to acknowledge the damage they do. Stoicism offers a powerful perspective here. Marcus Aurelius famously advised, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one." The Stoic isn't someone who never errs. They're someone deeply committed to the continuous improvement of their character. Admitting fault isn't weakness, it's strength. It requires courage to confront yourself honestly, to admit you were wrong, and to meaningfully attempt to make amends. Therefore, someone who consistently avoids accountability is showing you who they truly are, not through their words, but through their actions. The unrepentant heart is one of profound weakness disguised as strength. They cling to excuses because self-awareness demands courage and humility they simply don't possess. So, what do you do when faced with someone who never truly owns their mistakes? How do you navigate this without losing your dignity, your boundaries, and your emotional health? The Stoic path is not about changing them. It's about changing your response. First, recognize clearly what's happening. Observe patterns rather than isolated incidents. If you consistently feel dismissed or invalidated when addressing legitimate hurts, trust your instincts. Document it for your own clarity. Write down the specific incidents, not for their sake, but for yours. This removes ambiguity and protects your mental clarity. Next, set firm emotional boundaries. Clearly express your expectation just once. I'm willing to work through challenges, but it's important that we both acknowledge when we've caused harm. Without mutual accountability, it's hard for me to trust this relationship. Your clarity can feel uncomfortable, but it's essential. You're not responsible for how they respond, only for the honesty of your message. Then, adopt a core Stoic principle. Manage your expectations around their capacity for change. Stop waiting for apologies that may never come. Instead, redirect that energy into relationships that offer mutual accountability and respect. Accept the person's limitations without resentment, but with eyes wide open. And finally, protect your peace by reinforcing your self-worth. Remind yourself frequently, your boundaries are valid. Your pain matters. Your expectations for respect and accountability are not unrealistic. A Stoic isn't emotionless. They are clear-sighted. They acknowledge pain without being consumed by it, and they refuse to allow someone else's lack of accountability to diminish their own integrity or self-respect. Let's put this into a real-life scenario you might recognize. Imagine you've got a close friend who repeatedly cancels plans last minute, often leaving you disappointed and inconvenienced. You bring it up gently but clearly, explaining how it impacts you. Instead of an honest apology or genuine attempt to change, your friend responds with, "Things come up. You need to be more flexible," or "It's not a big deal. Everyone cancels plans sometimes." You feel unheard, invalidated. It hurts. And for a long time, you accept it, hoping someday they'll understand and improve. But today, you decide to apply your Stoic strategy. The next time it happens, you calmly but firmly state your boundary. "I value our friendship, but when plans are frequently canceled, I feel disrespected. It's important to me that we both honor our commitments." You don't expect immediate change, but you clearly state your expectation. When the pattern continues unchanged, you don't argue or justify. Instead, you quietly adjust your expectations. You stop relying on them for things that matter. You shift your time and energy toward relationships that reciprocate your respect and care. You still hold compassion for your friend, but now it's tempered with clear boundaries. You're no longer waiting for apologies that won't come. You've chosen clarity over conflict, peace over resentment. In doing this, you reclaim your emotional health and your personal dignity. You've embraced the Stoic wisdom that people will show you who they are, and your job isn't to change them, but to respond wisely and truthfully. Because ultimately, an unrepentant heart speaks loudly, not about your worth, but about theirs. Your job isn't to fix that heart. Your job is to honor your own. Remember at the start when I asked if you've ever felt drained, uncertain, or manipulated by someone close to you? Now, having explored the subtle yet evident signs of hidden toxicity, you've gained the clarity and strength that Stoicism offers. You now know how to see through manipulative charm, resist isolation tactics, and stand confidently in your own truth. By embracing these Stoic principles, you won't just improve your relationships, you'll transform your inner world. You'll feel grounded, emotionally secure, and fully capable of protecting your energy and peace, no matter what life throws at you. Stoicism reminds us that our greatest strength lies in our capacity for clarity, resilience, and dignity, especially when faced with adversity. I challenge you to put this wisdom into practice. Next time you're confronted with subtle manipulation, pause and ask, "Am I honoring myself right now?" Share in the comments below which part of this video resonated most with you. or simply leave us a message like, "I loved this video," or let us know how we can improve in future content. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Join our community of growing Stoics. Together, let's live with courage, clarity, and calm.